And welcome back, everyone, to the Beyond the Profile podcast. I'm your host, Sheiny. We have an incredible guest on the show today for episode 7. Episode 7, only a few more away from double digits. Not too shabby. But we go into a number of different things in terms of the racial injustices in society, the type of work her company Edelman is doing to enhance the communication and the value of communication to different clients and businesses on how they can handle these racial injustices and the COVID outbreak as well. And there's just so much more that we hit on as well. So hope you guys enjoy it. Please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. See you on the other side. Oh, yeah. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. Today, I'm joined on the show by a former colleague of mine. She served in the Clinton administration, specializing in policy development and issues management. Spent 15 years at Ogilvy, culminating a role as head of public affairs. She was a managing director at APCO Worldwide, a co-founder of the Washington Area Women's Foundation. In 2019, was named one of Savoy Magazine's most influential women in corporate America, and currently the U.S. Chief Operating Officer at Edelman, which is a global communications firm that partners with businesses and organizations to evolve, promote, and protect their brands and reputations. And to be honest, that might only be 1/16 of a resume. That guest on the show with me today is Lisa Ross. Lisa, thanks so much for joining the show.
I'm so delighted to be here with you, Michael. I have always been a fan of yours, and to see you do your thing and make a difference in ways that are meaningful, especially right now, like warms my heart. So I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I really do appreciate it, Lisa. And you're someone that I've really looked up to, just not only from the fact of all the accomplishments that I just listed, but your leadership capability and how you communicate with other people is something that I have looked up to for a long time. Me being at Edelman before, and the way that you would handle the DC office. I mean, it's just something that I've really looked up to, and I'm just really excited that we're here.
Well, we're just going to sit here and compliment each other back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. That's the episode.
I'm totally into it.
Exactly. Well, to get the episode going a little bit, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up, go to college, et cetera?
Let me talk about the things maybe that I'm most proud of and the things that I think have really determined who I am today. I am a native Washingtonian. I grew up when Washington was known as Chocolate City, and it was the center of Black excellence in the United States. Both of my parents were civil servants, and they instilled in us that you could do well by doing good. I was educated by feminist nuns when I was in high school. I went to Jesuit College, Marquette University, where my belief in social justice really blossomed. And I guess in my nature, I'm a problem solver. And so all of the positions that you just identified were opportunities for me to help solve problems and hopefully lead to greater good. I've been married for 30 years. I have 2 children. My greatest accomplishments are, my parents would say, remarkable, remarkable daughter. My children will say, best mother ever. And my husband would say solid wife. I haven't quite nailed that.
Solid, wow.
Yeah, only solid, but he's still here. But those are the things that I'm most proud of.
Exactly. Well, I mean, solid's not bad. So that's good.
I have time to improve on it, Michael.
Exactly. There's always room for improvement. No, but I mean, you mentioned pretty briefly that the people that influenced you over the years to really get into public service and really problem solving in general. I listed that you were a part of the Clinton administration. What sort of work were you doing for them, and what kind of got you into that? Were you studying public policy in college and it kind of just went that way? What was your thought process behind that?
My degree was at a double degree in journalism and political science. And so coming from Washington, where it was big P political, Congress, the executive branch, the judiciary, and then little p, the city of Washington. And so I guess I was groomed. I was grown to believe that through policy, you can make a difference. You can advocate for change. You can ask for change. You can desire change. But systemic change is brought about through policy changes. And so that's always been why and where I was drawn to policy, and my belief that that's really where you could institutionalize changes that need to be made. The people that influenced me were, again, people who saw a problem and said, this is not acceptable, or this can be better. And it's almost how I see the world. And is, when we were in the same office, for me, it's like, if something's good, I think it can be better. I think it can be remarkable. And if something is not good, I think it can and should be much better. And so, the best and the worst part about working with me is that I believe almost any and everything is possible. Like I think it's like just the way I am wired, that I believe any and everything is possible. And I think if it brings about positive change, that you should be relentless in your pursuit of that.
It's a very optimistic mindset, definitely.
Optimism right now.
Yeah, exactly. We definitely need that. You mentioned policies a little bit, and that's kind of why you wanted to get into working with the Clinton administration, but specifically, were there any sort of policies that you worked closely on that you were really interested in and motivated about, or were there some that you were kind of a little bit distant on? What kind of work in that regard?
I worked in the White House Office of Women's Initiatives and Outreach when I was with the Clinton administration, and I was also the deputy director of the Federal Glass Ceiling Commission, which was the federal commission that looked at barriers to prevent women and people of color from the C-suite, from advancing to the C-suite. And in the Clinton administration, in the White House Office of Women's Initiatives, what the president created that office because he wanted to understand the impact of policy decisions on women and families. So if he's going to make a decision on welfare reform, which he did, before he made that decision, it was my job and others to find out what impact that would have on women and families. Issues like choice, issues like pay equity, issues having to do with foreign affairs, like whether you go to war or not, whether you have a trade agreement with a particular country. What is the impact of all of those decisions on women and families? And so my job and the job of my colleagues was literally to find that out. And I wouldn't say that we always got the outcome that we wanted, but the president could make a decision well informed and understanding the consequences of the decision that he was making and the impact that it was going to have. And I think in many cases, and this was his legacy, that much of what he tried to do was to have a positive impact. But in politics and in policy, you can't make everyone happy. You actually are failing if you do, because in my mind and in my belief, like, what do you stand for? Because if you're making everybody happy, then like you don't actually stand for anything except for making people happy. And I think what constituents want is to believe in our policymakers and our politicians. And I may not agree with everything that you say, but I have to believe that you are a decent human being and that you have my best interest or the best interests of others at heart. And a valuable lesson I learned with one of my dearest friends, Michael Steele, who's the former RNC chair, a former lieutenant governor of Maryland. And when we met, our kids were small, they're now adults. And I said, so I think we might be on different sides of the aisle. And he said, no, he said, we probably want the same things. We just have a different point of view on how to get there.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. When I think about politics, and especially in the White House or a president or any sort of administration, my first thought is I want to make as many people happy as possible. Now, along the lines of that, follow my policies and what I care for. But it's interesting in the way that you put that, where you don't want to make everyone happy because, you got elected in office for the things that you've done, and you want to make an impact on those sorts of initiatives and the things you were talking about with, women's rights and equal pay and stuff of that sort, there's still things that we are fighting today. And it's really interesting that you say that. And kind of moving along a little bit, you worked on so many different initiatives and impacts within that administration. What kind of, you went towards PR after that. What was kind of your mindset to go towards PR after working on some policies that were very substantial in our country's history? What was kind of the driving force in your thought process to get into PR? Did you think that you would make just as much of an impact doing that, or what was kind of your thought process?
Well, I actually had started my career in comms. And so again, since part of my degree was political science, but the other part of my degree was called public relations, but communications. And I started off at at Fleischman Hillard. And then from Fleischman Hillard, and a lot of the work that I was doing in the administration was comms related. And so the transition to Ogilvy after I left the administration was not that difficult. And Michael, actually, in many ways, it, for me, sort of tells the story of how I see the world, and that is the role of communications. Mm-hmm. I think it is so essential to everything that we do and everything that we can accomplish. And so, for example, you can have, you can have a cure for COVID. You can have a cure for COVID, but if you can't communicate about that cure, then it's for naught. Like, for example, we are working on now at Edelman, advising one of the pharmaceutical companies on how to communicate to hard to reach audiences the importance of participating in vaccine trials. And so if that communication strategy doesn't work, then the vaccine is not going to work because people will not engage in trials. And if the vaccine doesn't work, then it puts us right back in the beginning. And so while the work I was doing in the administration was more policy oriented, everything I've ever done is rooted in the impact that having information means. Like, information is power. And if you don't have information to make smart decisions, to determine a path forward, to determine where and how you can have impact to make decisions, then you really are at a loss. And so I think regardless of where I sit in public or private sector, the root of what I do is a belief that communications serves that really important purpose.
Definitely. And it seemed like it was a pretty easy transition, especially since you really started out doing that. Were there any sort of adjustments that you had to get into going from the government to the private sector? Anything that was just, wow, this is completely different, and I'm going to have to ask for help multiple times?
So this is so silly, but something that really tripped me up were like things like timesheets.
Oh my God.
And anybody who is listening to this podcast is like nodding their head vigorously.
Oh yeah.
Because like in government and in other industry, you just do the work. And then in our industry, you do the work, and then you have to plug in the work, and then you have to do more work, and then you have to calculate it, and you have to follow the budget and so forth. And so that seems like a small thing, but that was really, really challenging for me. And I think also everything that I've ever tried to do, I've tried to make it mission driven. Like, I've needed to feel like there's an impact, and not everything that I've done is quote unquote white hat. But again, where I believe that if you can have a positive impact, even for a bad industry or a quote unquote bad client, that you should do it. And but it's all about like kind of being clear about what your ultimate goal is for your client, your colleague, for whatever your audience is, and then being sort of relentless in your pursuit of it. So the transition was not as hard as I expected it to be, because again, it was like communications impact, but the mechanics of it like tripped me up. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. I mean, funny little story. When I was at Edelman, I was the one that looked over timesheets. So people would come to me and get upset about the timesheets. And I just kept saying, guys, I don't care either. Like, please.
But you know what? But then the other side of that is you take a client's money, right? And they've worked hard to secure that budget. And in reality, like your ability to be judicious and respectful of those resources is part of the relationship building. Like you really have to respect how they, how they secured that money, and you have to respect how you use it. And timesheets is an annoying but necessary little way to do that.
Definitely. And especially for, people that might not be as client facing or doesn't have a relationship with those clients, they don't really understand why they have to do it in such detail and notate what kind of times went in. But I also don't want to get on this tangent of timesheets either. That would just put everyone to sleep.
Memories for everybody.
I know, right?
Let's go past that.
Exactly. Well, one of the things that you were mentioning was you wanted to do something in terms of impact, and whether that be with you in the government or going into the private sector with NPR. One of the things that I notice about you, and I follow you on LinkedIn and such, is you're very vocal on how businesses should be responding to the systemic racism and racial injustice in our country, especially with George Floyd, Jacob Blake, Breonna Taylor, things like that. And I kind of want to go into that a little bit with your Edelman Trust Barometer and the fight for racial justice in America. And I know you guys conducted 2 separate surveys for this trust barometer. I'm just going to hit off 3 questions. What is, or explain that trust barometer, what it really is. What did you guys find in the survey, and what did you personally find interesting from those results?
So great question. And I thank you for asking it, because this is where the impact comes in, right? So for the past 20 years, Edelman's doing the Edelman Trust Barometer, and we look at trust in 4 primary institutions: business, nonprofits, media, and government. It was interesting this year when we launched the Trust Barometer. It was depressing because across the board globally, there was a decrease in trust in all of those institutions. And the only one where there was a sense of competency, so it's like, do I trust you to do the right thing? And then do I believe you're capable of doing the right thing? So respondents felt that business was capable of doing the right thing, and but would they? And so we started the year like with a deficit in trust in those 4 institutions. And then the first bit of research that we did into 2020 was for COVID. And it was like, what is the expectation of those 4 institutions in COVID? And it was to lead. So, the first trust barometer was like, nobody's leading here and we need somebody to lead. We did the COVID trust, and it was like, we expect business and government to get together and lead us out of this mess, this debacle. And then when George Floyd was murdered, we asked the question, what is the responsibility of business in eradicating systemic racism? And so the first question is, do you believe that systemic racism exists? And so it was universal for a survey like this, that it was higher among women, but still significant with men. It was higher among people of color, particularly African Americans, Black people, but across the board, people of color and white people. It was higher among 18 to 34 than it was 55. It's higher with Democrats and independents than it was Republicans, but there was a universal sense that systemic racism in this country exists, and that business has a responsibility to help eradicate it. So what can business do? 1, use your influence. I had the opportunity to talk to Michelle Obama as she was leaving the White House. And when I asked her what branch of government she thought had the most impact, she said none of them. Business does, because business has the most reach. And so that was confirmed in this research. Second thing businesses can do is advocate and educate, very much themselves. The third thing is get your own house in order. We had so many clients who were saying, I want to talk about this, but my house is really not in order. We don't really have, an appropriate number of people of color on our board, our senior leadership. Edelman had the same problem. And so like, how do you navigate this? And it was like, guess what? Nobody's house is in order. That's why we're having the conversation. That's why we're in the situation that we're in, but you can fix it. You can do something. And the fourth thing was, there are consequences if you don't. Because, close to 70% of people surveyed said, I will buy or boycott based on how I think a brand or corporation responds to trying to eradicate systemic racism. So, it's really an equity issue, right? Business is, and often when businesses ask me, like, I'm not sure if my stakeholders, I'm not sure if my customers want me to take a position on this. And, I'm like, if you look at your value statement, almost everybody's value statement says something about equal opportunity, equity, access. That's all this conversation is about, and making sure that, you and I are different, but you and I should have the same opportunity.
No, that's really interesting. And for me personally, when I think of these sorts of steps that you laid out, the first thing that really comes to my mind as someone who's a really big fan is the NBA. And the NBA has done a really great job of using their voice, getting their own house in order, using their power and influence, not just as an organization, but as, LeBron James, as people who are individuals using their platform for the racial injustice, for more than a vote that they have, where they're coming out and talking about voting, where, what was it? I'm just going to throw out stats, but like millions of people in the 2016 election who did not vote. And that is your civic duty to do that. Right. And, when I think of businesses obviously have influence. They have great influence and they need to do something. But what are you telling maybe your people or maybe closest to you at Edelman or friends? Should they be abiding by these same sorts of guidelines to promote anti-racism? What's kind of your thought on that?
Yes, a one-word answer, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you used a word that's incredibly important, and it's the difference between, not being racist and being anti-racist. An environment where people are called to be anti-racist. Like what we have said at Edelman is, if you are not actively engaged in creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment, this is not the place for you. So we've never gone so far as to say that. So we've said this is not the right place for you if you do not believe in these values. And that's what we are all called to do. And I have enjoyed like the summer of counseling corporate leadership and CEOs who are really struggling with this issue. And, I think one of the most poignant conversations I had were like, this gentleman was just like wringing his hands and he was like, I don't understand, like, how can I get deeper into this? Why is this not working? And I said, you have been quick to put Black Lives Matter on your website, but are you willing to put the sign on your lawn? Are you willing to put it on your car? Are you willing to wear a face mask that says it? And so, these experiences have to be lived. You can't be one person at work and not be that person in your personal life. And this is where the intersection comes. And I think as I think about, you and I had this conversation one time, I think we were talking about planning to do this, like what is unique. And I think what my superpower is that I believe what I believe, and I believe that at work, and I believe it at home, and I believe it in my community. And I advance those things. And it's not always easy, but I think it's essential and important to actually bring about change.
Definitely. And I know me personally, after everything that has happened these last few months, and you have the time, just being at home because of the pandemic, right. You have the time to think about everything that you've done and everything that you've thought about and how that can really affect other people.
Right.
When I think of other businesses that have come out very quickly, maybe to support Black Lives Matter and stuff of that sort, I don't see that much anymore. Maybe it's just me. Is it a PR move to do it so quickly? And then are you guys counseling them after that to, further communicate and talk about the subject or change the way their organization thinks about these things? What kind of...
Well, you can see I'm smiling and like grinning and like leaning into the screen because yes, and yes. And that's the problem. We advised all these corporations and they were very quick to make a statement, but this is about beyond the statement. Like, what are you actually doing? And the second set of research that we did, and in response to the murder of George Floyd in this conversation about systemic racism, revealed that the majority of those polled feel exactly what you do. They are disappointed in the role of business. Business started off strong by saying things, but what have they actually done? And so when we went back into the field to ask these questions, it was almost verbatim what you said. People were like, I'm not seeing anything. You said something up front, but you haven't said anything since. I haven't seen any change on your board. I haven't seen any change in your hiring policies, in your promotion, in your advertising. And let me remind you, consequences. 70% say that they will buy or boycott if they don't think that you are actively engaged in this conversation in a way that they think is meaningful.
So, we talk about all this stuff, and in the survey, the two separate surveys that were done at, I believe, different times. I think one was in June, you mentioned, and August.
Yep.
What sorts of things did you find interesting, and what shocked you about the results?
I'll tell you what shocked me, and what we already talked about the fact that I'm an optimist, right? So yeah. I will say, though, this is what shocked me, and this is what disappointed me. There was a leveling off in people's attitudes about, yes, systemic racism exists, and yes, business has a role to play, and yes, I personally have a role to play. So we saw that at a really high level after George Floyd was murdered. And then that was, we went in June, we went back into the field in August, and it subsided a bit, despite all the protests, all the conversations, all the national attention. But then, Michael, after Jacob Blake was maimed, we thought, let's go back in. It went right back up. So I think the thing that surprised and quite frankly disheartened me is that there's an indication that people have to see it, believe it, that they have to see these horrible atrocities against men and women of color in order to actually believe it. But when they see it, they're like, I support Black Lives Matter. I support the protest. I believe that media is biased in coverage of the protest. I'm disappointed in business. I'm incredibly disappointed and have no confidence in government. But there's an indication that unless you see it, sometimes for some people, they don't believe it.
Definitely. And I know when this happened 2014 with in Ferguson, when
Michael Brown,
when Michael Brown, that was all on
Martin, remember?
Yeah, and Trayvon Martin, and
let's go back to Emmett Till.
Yeah, Emmett Till, that too. Yeah, exactly.
Historic in this country, and I think for many of us, with a slight smile, but not a nice, happy smile, kind of a nasty smile. It's like, how did you not know?
Exactly.
Say, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm like, people like me, and you don't have to be brown to know this. People like you, you're a white man. You've known that this is part of our culture, that these levels, and we're talking about police brutality, but this level of discrimination and atrocities and brutality exists in all aspects of our country. It's in industry, it's in banking, it's in education, it's in housing, it's everywhere.
Exactly.
And so because I am an optimist, I think we as a nation are in a lot of pain, and I think that it's growing pains, and I think we're growing, and that's why it hurts, and we have to continue to hurt and to grow, and that we'll get to the other side.
That's a great way of putting it, growing pains. I mean, it still hurts, but at the same time, it feels like we're getting better in some ways, as the optimist in all of us, for sure. Lisa, I want to be mindful of your time. I know that you have to go. We didn't really get to talk a lot about your transition into Edelman, but I think in just the context of this podcast, really, it's finding something that you are happy and passionate about. And I know for you, it's the position that you're in with Edelman, and it's clearly that because it's the impacts that we're talking about with these racial injustices, these equal pay instances that we're talking about, and for me, it's just very enlightening to see someone that's so happy. I mean, you're just smiling right now about it right now. So it's very enlightening. And I do have just a couple final questions for you, if that's okay. Looking back on your freshman year of college self, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Don't worry about it.
Okay, just like that?
Don't worry about it. You were stressing about some stuff that does not matter.
Well, that's quick and easy. There you go. Is there anything else you want to accomplish in your life that you can look back on to your young self that you would be proud of?
That's a tough question. I'll answer it by saying this. I feel fortunate that the intersection that you talked about has happened for me. And I know that this is your passion. Like, how do you make work in your professional life passionate? Like, it's got to mean something to you. And for me, it's like the intersection of three things. You have to be good at something, and that thing that you're good at has to be valuable to someone. And then that thing that you're good at and that is valuable to someone, you have to actually enjoy it. And so I think that's where my sweet spot is. I love what I do. I'm good at it, and it's necessary. And I think that's the sweet spot for everybody at work, is to find that intersection.
Wow, I might have to make that into a poster, to be honest, and just hang it over my bed. I mean, that's pretty incredible right there. What do you do to sharpen your sword and refine your craft?
I spend time with my family, which includes my favorite daughter, who's a 10-year-old English bulldog, Elizabeth Taylor. I said that because my real daughter is listening. I spend time with my family. I read a lot. I don't watch the news as much as I should, because I gather what I need from it and I move on, because I find it challenging and difficult. I'm a spiritual person, and so I lean into my faith, which matters to me. And I surround myself with as much positive energy and people that I possibly can.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, Lisa, I just want to take some time to say thank you for doing this interview. I know that you have so much other things going on. I know when I was at Edelman and left, I sent you an email saying, hey, could you do this for me? And I told you about your leadership qualities, and that's how something that I admire so much about you, the way that you just go about your day to day. It's something that I admire so much, and just want to say thank you for doing this, and good luck in everything in the future, and stay safe.
I'm proud of you. I'm happy to do it. You have a great future ahead of you, and anything I can do to help facilitate it. I don't think you're going to need much help, but I'm here if you need me. Thank you for this.
Thanks.
And best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I want to thank Lisa again for taking the time to do this. She's an extremely intelligent and intriguing woman to interview, and her thoughts behind everything. It's really cool. I really push for you guys to check her out on LinkedIn at Lisa Ross. Again, she posts a number of articles and comments and does a number of interviews with other people, and how she's looking to transform society and make an impact as well. So please give her a follow or check her out there. And you can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, wherever, at Beyond the Profile. Please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Again, wherever you find your podcasts. And just want to thank you guys. I really do appreciate all of the listens, all of the comments, all of the reviews, all of the texts, and everything like that. So thank you again for everything. And we're going to have some incredible interviews to follow as well. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you again. See you guys later.